My millionaire dad passed away and left us his inheritance. There were 5 kids in the will, but I only have 2 siblings. We reached out to them and found out something disgusting about our father. So I guess I should start with some context before diving into this absolute dumpster fire of a situation. My name is Scout Morgan. I'm 35, and up until a few weeks ago, I thought my family was pretty normal, messed up in the usual ways, but nothing special. My dad Richard ran a chain of hardware stores across 3 states. He was tough but fair, expected a lot from us, but also made sure we had everything we needed. My mom Grace died of cancer when my little sister Eliza was 14, which was rough on all of us. After she passed, Dad never remarried or even dated as far as we knew. He just threw himself into the business in raising us. There's also my brother Theo, who's 32 and has always been the family rebel. He went into art instead of business, which drove Dad crazy, but I always suspected Dad was secretly proud of him, even though they fought constantly. Eliza's 29 now and became this hotshot corporate lawyer, always trying to keep the peace between all of us. Me, I followed in Dad's footsteps and have been working at the family business for years. I always figured I'd take over when Dad retired. We all drifted apart as adults, the way siblings do, I guess. We'd see each other at holidays and birthdays, but we were all busy with our own lives. Then Dad died, heart attack while jogging, dropped dead on the spot. It was a shock, but he was in his 60s and had always pushed himself too hard. We all came back to the family home to deal with the funeral and the will. None of us were particularly worried about the inheritance stuff. Dad had done well for himself, built up a nice fortune, and we figured he'd split it pretty evenly between the 3 of us. That's when everything went to complete crap. Dad's attorney Marcus called us into Dad's study with this weird look on his face. I thought maybe Dad had left everything to charity or something, which would have sucked, but at least made sense. What Marcus told us instead blew my mind. Apparently, my dad had a whole other family just 2 hours away. A woman named Diana, and their 2 kids, Jordan and Ruby. He'd been with them for 27 freaking years, and they were all in the will. I couldn't process what Marcus was saying at first. It felt like someone had switched my dad with an imposter, or like I was in some bizarre dream. Marcus looked so uncomfortable delivering this news, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact. I remember he had this thick folder of documents in front of him, and he kept tapping it nervously with his fingers. He explained that Dad's estate was to be divided equally among all 5 children, not just me, Theo, and Eliza, but these 2 strangers, Jordan and Ruby, too. I absolutely lost it. I started yelling at Marcus, accusing him of being in on some scam. I demanded to know how long he'd known about this and why he'd covered for my dad. Marcus just sat there taking it, then calmly pulled out some papers from his folder. They were DNA test results confirming that Jordan and Ruby were definitely Richard's biological children. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Eliza tried to calm things down, asking Marcus a bunch of lawyer questions about the legality of all this. But before he could really answer, Theo grabbed this heavy glass paperweight from Dad's desk and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the bookshelf, sending books and glass flying everywhere. Marcus stood up and threatened to leave if we couldn't discuss this like adults. His face was red and he was clearly at the end of his rope. I didn't care. I needed to know if Mom had known about this other family. Had she been aware our dad was cheating on her for years? Had she died knowing her husband had another woman and other kids? Marcus said he honestly didn't know the full history of the situation, which just pissed me off more. I stormed out of the study, shouting that I'd contest the will even if it cost me everything. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, needing to get some air before I broke something. Eliza followed me outside, trying to get me to calm down and think rationally. She kept saying we needed more information before making any decisions. I couldn't even look at her. I just got in my car and sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't drive away, but I couldn't go back inside either. When I finally returned to the house about an hour later, I found Theo in Dad's study, drinking directly from Dad's prized bottle of 30-year-old scotch. Not even using a glass, just chugging from the bottle like it was cheap beer. Dad would have been furious. The thought almost made me laugh. Theo suggested we should meet these half-siblings before jumping to conclusions. Maybe they were victims in this too, he said. I shut that down immediately, and Eliza agreed with me for once. No way were we sitting down for a family dinner with the products of our dad's betrayal. That's when Marcus dropped another bombshell. According to the will, all 5 of us had to attend a family dinner together within 30 days of the will reading, or the entire estate would go to charity. Dad was manipulating us from beyond the grave. I called my law school buddy Jamie right away. We'd stayed friends over the years, and he specialized in estate law. I wanted to know if we could contest this ridiculous will. Jamie said we could try, but it would be expensive, and the outcome was far from certain. Dad had apparently done his homework and made the will pretty airtight. While on the phone with Jamie, I started searching online for information about Diana and her kids. I was looking for anything that might suggest they had manipulated my dad or fraudulently inserted themselves into his will. Eliza kept trying to be the voice of reason, suggesting we should at least meet our half-siblings once to satisfy the will's requirements. Theo accused her of betraying Mom's memory by even considering it. Eliza's face crumpled, and she retreated upstairs to her old bedroom. Later that night, I heard her crying while I passed by her door. Theo discovered a locked drawer in Dad's desk and managed to pry it open. Inside were birthday cards and school photos of Jordan and Ruby going back years. There were report cards, artwork, concert programs, all the stuff parents save. It was obvious Dad had been actively involved in their lives, not just sending checks. This wasn't some fleeting affair. This was a whole second life. I kept digging and found that Diana had been Dad's high school girlfriend before he met Mom. But the timeline didn't add up for Jordan, who appeared to be in his mid-20s. That meant Dad had reconnected with Diana while he was married to Mom. The betrayal cut even deeper. Dad hadn't just maintained a separate family, he'd actively cheated on Mom. Eliza suggested we contact Diana directly to arrange this mandatory dinner, but Theo and I refused to participate. She decided she would meet Diana privately first, to feel things out. I thought this was a terrible idea, but Eliza always had to do things her way. I hired a private investigator named Devin to dig up dirt on Diana and her kids. I was hoping to find evidence of gold digging or manipulation, anything we could use against them. But Devin reported back that Diana was just a nurse at a local hospital who'd struggled financially over the years. She wasn't wealthy, didn't have a criminal record, and by all accounts was just a normal, hardworking single mom. That shifted my focus to finding ways to invalidate the will itself. Theo was a mess, drinking heavily every night. One evening, I got a call from Eliza saying Theo had gotten drunk and was trying to drive to Diana's house in the middle of the night. I raced over to the family home to find Theo stumbling around looking for Dad's car keys and Eliza trying to block him from leaving. He was too strong for her to physically stop. I managed to grab him just as he was getting into Dad's car. Theo took a swing at me, and we ended up in a full-blown fight in the driveway. The neighbors must have heard the commotion because soon the police were pulling up. Officer Martinez separated us and diffused the situation. He recognized me from community business events and cut us some slack, but insisted someone needed to take responsibility for Theo. I reluctantly reluctantly agreed to let him crash at my apartment for the night. The next morning, Eliza texted to say she'd arranged to meet Diana at a coffee shop. I thought she was making a mistake, but she's stubborn as hell once she makes up her mind. Later, she called to tell me she'd arrived at the coffee shop to find not just Diana, but also Jordan waiting for her. She said she almost left right then, feeling ambushed, but decided to stay. According to Eliza, Jordan was this soft-spoken music teacher in his mid-20s who insisted he never wanted money from our family, just acknowledgement. Diana had shown Eliza love letters our dad had written over the years. The kicker was that some of the letters were dated during times when Dad was still married to Mom. Diana apparently broke down crying when Eliza confronted her about enabling Dad's double life, saying she loved him too much to let him go. Jordan told Eliza that he and Ruby had grown up knowing about us, but were instructed never to contact us. The thought of these strangers knowing about our lives while we knew nothing about theirs made my skin crawl. When Eliza asked why they were claiming the inheritance if it wasn't about money, Jordan explained that Diana had medical bills from cancer treatment, the same disease that killed our mom. I could tell that detail had gotten to Eliza, but it didn't sway me. When Eliza got back to the house, I refused to listen to her report on the meeting. Theo was too hungover to process anything. She ended up writing everything in an email we could read when we were ready. My PI Devin revealed that Diana had actually refused child support from Dad to maintain secrecy. Eliza tried to spin this as evidence that Diana wasn't after money, but I saw it differently. In my mind, this was part of a long-term scheme to get an even bigger payoff later. When I said this to Eliza, she accused me of being determined to villainize people I hadn't even met. Theo finally got around to reading Eliza's email about the meeting and became fixated on the timeline of Dad's deception. He dug out our parents' old anniversary album to compare dates with the letters Diana had shown Eliza. I suggested to Eliza and Theo that we offer Diana a smaller settlement to just disappear. Eliza shot this down immediately, saying Jordan and Ruby were legally entitled to their share according to the will. This led to a huge argument where I accused Eliza of betraying our family. Theo found photographs suggesting Dad had been with Diana the day of Mom's funeral. He couldn't verify if this was true, but just the possibility sent him spiraling. He left the house without a word and headed to a bar. Eliza received a text from Jordan asking if his sister Ruby could meet her. I happened to see the message pop up on Eliza's phone while she was in the shower. I took her phone and replied as her, setting up a meeting. I planned to confront Ruby myself. Diana called Eliza that evening about Dad's collection of rare books he had apparently promised to Ruby. None of us knew anything about any book collection. We began to wonder what other assets Dad might have hidden. I found a storage unit key among Dad's personal effects. There was a note with it saying all 5 children needed to be present to access the contents. As much as it pained me, I had to share this information with Theo and Eliza. We drove to the storage facility together the next day, only to find out from the manager that all parties listed on the rental agreement needed to be present. That meant Jordan and Ruby too. We had no choice but to contact our half-siblings if we wanted to see what Dad had stored there. The meeting at the storage facility was beyond awkward. I refused to shake hands with Jordan or Ruby when they arrived with Diana. The tension was so thick that the facility manager almost denied us entry. He kept looking between all of us, clearly sensing something was off. Once inside, we found the unit meticulously organized with memorabilia from both families. There were shelves labeled for each child, containing personal items Dad had saved over the years. Theo noticed there were no holiday photos showing both families together. Dad had kept his 2 lives completely separate. Ruby, who turned out to be this poised graduate student type, discovered financial records showing Dad had paid for her college education. Meanwhile, I found documents suggesting Dad had hidden money in offshore accounts. This raised questions about potential tax fraud that made me nervous about the business. Jordan uncovered letters indicating Dad had planned to unite the families after Mom died, but apparently someone had threatened to expose him, so he continued the deception out of fear. Eliza found Dad's journal detailing his guilt and internal struggle over maintaining 2 separate families. She started reading passages aloud, but it just created more tension. Ruby suggested we each take time to read portions privately instead. While everyone was distracted reading different documents, I quietly photographed financial papers that concerned me. Jordan noticed what I was doing and confronted me privately, creating even more bad blood between us. Theo discovered artwork he'd created as a child preserved alongside similar pieces by Ruby. Instead of finding connection in this, it just made him angrier. He accused Ruby of stealing Dad's attention that should have been devoted to us after Mom died. Ruby revealed she'd studied art history, partly because of Theo's influence through Dad. When Theo didn't believe her, she showed him childhood sketchbooks with techniques clearly mimicking Theo's style. It was weird seeing how this stranger had been influenced by my brother without him knowing. We found medical records showing Dad had a heart condition for years, but never told any of his children. For a brief moment, all 5 of us united in feeling betrayed by this shared deception. I discovered documents suggesting the family business had serious cash flow problems. I didn't share this with the others, instead starting to formulate a plan to use my inheritance to save the business. We found a video recording Dad had made before his death, but argued about whether to watch it immediately. We eventually decided to postpone viewing until the required family dinner. When we were locking up the storage unit, I deliberately took a financial ledger I didn't want the others to see. I didn't realize Ruby had noticed and had already made copies of key documents earlier. During the drive home, Eliza suggested giving Diana's family a chance. That's when I revealed I'd already filed a legal challenge to the will. Eliza was furious that I'd done this without consulting her or Theo. Theo briefly expressed sympathy for Jordan and Ruby growing up without Dad's physical presence, but I reminded him they'd received financial support we knew nothing about. His momentary empathy hardened back into resentment. I proposed postponing the family dinner requirement indefinitely while my legal challenge proceeded, but Eliza reminded me that if we didn't comply within 30 days, everything would go to charity per the will's terms. We reluctantly agreed to hold the dinner at the family home in 2 weeks. I spent the next 2 weeks reviewing the financial documents I'd taken. The business was in worse shape than I thought, nearly bankrupt due to a combination of the economic downturn and some bad investments Dad had made. I needed the full inheritance to save it and protect the employees who depended on those jobs. I started working on fabricating documents showing Diana had been blackmailing Dad, thinking this might help my case to contest the will. Eliza, using her legal expertise, researched precedents for contesting wills involving secret families. She found most cases favored biological children regardless of circumstances. She started working on a compromise solution to present at the dinner. Theo visited Dad's grave one afternoon, planning to vent his anger. He found fresh flowers already there with a card from Ruby. He tore up the card but left the flowers, his anger mixed with confusion about how to feel. Jordan reached out to Theo, suggesting they meet at an art gallery as fellow artists. Theo initially refused, but Jordan sent him a portfolio of music compositions he'd created that were inspired by Theo's artwork. The gesture seemed to affect Theo, though he wouldn't admit it. I contacted my friend JB, an accountant with some shady connections, to help me doctor the financial records. I wanted to create evidence that Diana had forced Dad to include her children in the will. JB warned me about potential criminal charges for fraud and forgery. I promised him a percentage of the inheritance for his help, feeling desperate to save the business. Eliza discovered I'd emptied Dad's safe deposit box before she could inventory it. She had no legal authority to demand I returned the contents, but I could tell she was documenting my increasingly suspicious activities. Theo finally agreed to meet Jordan at a local bar. He drank too much and became emotionally volatile, ranting about Dad's betrayal. Jordan ended up driving Theo home, creating an unexpected moment of connection between them. Ruby visited the family business unannounced, introducing herself to employees as Richard's daughter. I arrived during her visit and publicly humiliated her, making a scene in front of customers. Word quickly spread through our small business community. I learned that Dad's life insurance policy named Diana as a beneficiary. This policy existed outside the will's provisions, which meant I couldn't contest it through the will challenge. I contacted the insurance company claiming potential fraud, hoping to delay the payout. Diana invited Eliza for tea to share stories about Dad. Eliza discovered photos suggesting Diana had been present at several events where our family was also in attendance over the years. Dad had apparently orchestrated near encounters for years without either family realizing. Theo began painting again after years of creative block. The paintings were dark and raw, processing his complex emotions about Dad's betrayal. The intensity of the work frightened him, so he invited Jordan to his studio to see them, seeking understanding from someone who might share his complicated feelings. I worked on falsifying emails to make it look like Diana had threatened to expose Dad, unless he included her children in the will. JB got cold feet about our plan, worrying about criminal exposure. I reminded him of his own past tax schemes I knew about, effectively threatening him to stay quiet. Eliza prepared legal documents for a potential settlement that would satisfy everyone's interests. She then discovered I had already filed additional legal motions without consulting her. She showed up at my apartment to confront me about going behind the family's back. During our argument, she noticed the financial documents and photos I'd been manipulating on my kitchen table. I caught her looking and accused her of betraying the family by siding with the interlopers. Jordan and Ruby discussed walking away from the inheritance to avoid more family drama. However, Diana's medical bills were mounting, and they needed the money. They decided to attend the dinner, but prepared themselves for hostility. The day of the dinner finally arrived. Eliza had prepared the family home meticulously, cooking Mom's recipes and setting the formal dining table. I arrived early with documents for everyone to sign that would protect the business while still giving Diana's family some inheritance. Eliza refused to distribute them, causing immediate tension between us. Theo brought one of his new paintings as a reluctant peace offering. When Diana arrived, Theo froze. He later told Eliza he recognized Diana from childhood memories. She had been watching our family from afar throughout our lives, appearing in the background of school events and community functions. Ruby brought Dad's favorite dessert, made from his mother's recipe. I was so angry seeing her act like she was part of our family that I deliberately knocked it to the floor. Jordan stepped between us as tensions escalated immediately. The dessert splattered across the hardwood floor that Mom had always kept immaculate. Eliza tried to establish ground rules for civil conversation, but I interrupted, directly accusing Diana of blackmail and manipulation. Diana calmly opened her purse and produced a stack of letters from Dad, proving their relationship had been consensual and loving throughout. Her composure made me even angrier. We attempted to start dinner despite the tension. Theo noticed Ruby's hands shaking as she picked at her food, just like our mothers used to when she was stressed. I could see something in his expression change, his carefully constructed anger beginning to crumble. I presented my evidence that Dad was coerced into changing his will. Jordan countered with records showing Dad had included them years ago, even before Mom died. I accused Jordan of forging documents, which led to more shouting. Diana tried to explain that she loved Dad, but regretted the secrecy that had hurt so many people. I called her a homewrecker, and worse, using language that would have made Mom wash my mouth out with soap. Eliza demanded I leave the table until I could be civil. With me temporarily banished to the living room, the remaining siblings attempted conversation. The weight of shared betrayal made it difficult, with long silences and stilted small talk. They agreed to watch Dad's video, hoping for explanations that might ease the tension. Dad's video began with apologies to both families. He looked older and more tired than I remembered, clearly recording this not long before his death. Technical issues caused the video to cut out at crucial moments, which was frustrating as hell. Theo's patience snapped and punched a wall, leaving a hole in the drywall and bloodying his knuckles. Ruby, who we learned was a medical student, helped bandage Theo's hand. He noticed prescription bottles in her purse and asked about them. She admitted she had the same anxiety condition Dad had suffered from, but never discussed with us. The video resumed with Dad explaining he had loved both Diana and Mom, but never found the courage to make a clean break. He described creating elaborate systems to maintain both families, including separate phones, email accounts, and even a fake travel schedule for business trips that never happened. Dad's video mentioned a final test for his children before revealing the true inheritance. I returned to the room just in time to hear this and scoffed at Dad's manipulation from beyond the grave. Eliza suggested we simply sell everything and split proceeds equally to avoid more fighting. I rejected Eliza's proposal immediately. I threatened to expose business irregularities that would implicate Dad posthumously if they didn't agree to my terms. Jordan seemed to realize I was bluffing and revealed he'd already consulted a forensic accountant about the business finances. The dinner devolved into accusations as I revealed I knew about tax evasion in the business from looking through Dad's private records. Eliza pointed out I had been running operations for years, so any legal liability would fall primarily on me, not Dad's memory. She had me cornered, and she knew it. Diana attempted to de-escalate by offering to take a smaller share of the inheritance. I was desperate and cornered, so I pulled out the fabricated evidence JB had helped me create. Just then, JB himself walked in the front door, having been waiting outside. He revealed my entire forgery plot, saying he couldn't be part of the fraud any longer. JB apologized to everyone for participating in my scheme, but admitted he had recorded our conversations as insurance against me turning on him. I lost it completely and lunged at JB, knocking over candles that ignited the dining room curtains. Chaos erupted as everyone scrambled to extinguish the growing fire. We formed a bucket brigade from the kitchen to the dining room, passing water and wet towels. Despite our efforts, family heirlooms and documents were damaged in the blaze. Diana revealed she had kept duplicates of Dad's letters and records, anticipating something might happen to the originals. The firefighters arrived to handle the remaining hotspots, efficiently dousing flames and checking for structural damage. Police officer Martinez also responded and recognized me from the previous incident with Theo. He began questioning everyone separately about how the fire started. I tried to slip away during the confusion, not wanting to face questions about the forged documents. Theo spotted me trying to leave and tackled me in the front yard. We ended up fighting as neighbors watched and emergency vehicles lit up the street with red and blue flashes. Officer Martinez discovered the forged documents and JB's recordings. He said he needed formal statements from everyone and asked us to come to the station. The night ended with all of us giving statements at the police station. Eliza tried to protect me by suggesting psychological distress had affected my judgment, but the evidence of forgery and attempted fraud was substantial. Officer Martinez held me for formal charges, and I spent the night in a cell. Theo confessed to Officer Martinez that he had discovered evidence of Dad's tax evasion years ago and kept quiet about it. He insisted I had escalated everything by trying to forge documents. Both of us were facing potential charges now, though mine were more serious. Jordan and Ruby Ruby offered character statements favorable to Theo, saying they didn't want to press charges against him. I threatened to implicate them in the tax fraud too, which completely destroyed any remaining family unity. Diana recalled information about Dad's business practices that could help reduce my potential sentence. She hesitated to get involved after how I treated her, but Eliza pleaded with her to help despite my behavior. JB provided authorities with detailed evidence of my forgery plans, but also implicated himself in past schemes. Prosecutors offered him a deal to testify against me, which he took immediately. The family home became a crime scene as investigators searched for financial records. Many documents were destroyed in the fire, so forensic accountants were brought in to reconstruct the business finances. Ruby discovered I had been embezzling from the business for years to cover my gambling debts. She hesitated to share this information, consulting with Eliza about the implications for the family and the business employees. Eliza used her legal background to negotiate reduced charges for both her brothers. The prosecutor had built a strong case against me, so she focused on separating Theo's case from my more serious crimes. Jordan visited Theo in holding, bringing art supplies to help pass the time. Guards initially refused to allow them, but Jordan created such a scene that a sympathetic officer eventually intervened. I was facing serious charges of fraud, forgery, and attempted deception of the court. I offered to return all embezzled funds, but prosecutors now had evidence of years of tax fraud at the company. They pushed for maximum penalties to make an example of me. The bail hearings determined I had to remain in custody due to flight risk and the seriousness of the charges. Theo was released on bond, completely shifting the power dynamic between us. I had always been the responsible older brother, and now I was the family criminal. Eliza discovered Dad had been preparing to come clean about both families shortly before his death. Apparently, I had threatened to leave the business if he did, so he continued the deception partly due to my ultimatum. I had forgotten that conversation, but now recalled telling Dad I'd quit if he did anything stupid when he had hinted at having a big family announcement. Diana visited me in jail, offering forgiveness I didn't deserve. I verbally attacked her, unable to accept her kindness. She left me a copy of Dad's complete journal and walked away without another word. I didn't open it for days. Theo and Jordan sorted through salvageable items from the fire, working together surprisingly well. They discovered a hidden safe in the basement that none of us had known about. They called Eliza before opening it, wanting a witness. The safe contained evidence that Dad had been embezzled from by his business partner decades ago. He never reported it to protect the partner's family, meaning the business had been operating at a deficit for years. I had been trying to hide this growing shortfall through creative accounting and eventually embezzlement. Ruby's medical knowledge helped identify prescription patterns in Dad's records, revealing he had been self-medicating for depression for years. None of us had any idea he struggled with mental health issues, always seeing him as the strong, unwavering patriarch. I finally read Dad's complete journal in my cell. The unvarnished truth about his cowardice and his favoritism toward me was difficult to accept. I had been his golden child, the one who followed in his footsteps, while he secretly admired Theo's artistic courage. The journal entries about his double life showed a man torn apart by his choices. I finally broke down and wrote a full confession of my crimes. Prosecutors offered Theo a deal to testify against me. Family loyalty made him hesitate, even after everything I'd done. Jordan reminded him that I had shown no such loyalty when threatening to implicate everyone. Diana revealed to the siblings that she had terminal cancer, the same type that took Mom. She had been hiding it to protect Jordan and Ruby from worry. The inheritance suddenly took on new meaning for everyone, as Diana's treatment was expensive and largely uncovered by insurance. The business's insurer investigated the fire at the family home. Evidence suggested it wasn't entirely accidental, with accelerants found in places away from the dining room where the candles had been knocked over. Theo became the focus of this new investigation. Eliza discovered Theo had been storing flammable art supplies improperly in the house. She couldn't determine if the fire spreading so quickly was deliberate or just negligence on Theo's part. She faced an ethical dilemma about protecting him while also being truthful with investigators. My trial date approached with mounting evidence against me. I offered a full confession implicating only myself, hoping to protect Theo and the family business reputation. Prosecutors considered a plea deal that would reduce my sentence in exchange for full cooperation with the tax investigation. Ruby found evidence that Theo had created art incorporating fire damage before the dinner. Instead of reporting this to investigators, she confronted him privately. Their shared secret formed an unexpected bond between them. Jordan visited me again in jail, bringing music he had composed about forgiveness and family. I finally acknowledged my wrongdoing, apologizing for my treatment of Diana and her children. Jordan recorded our conversation as evidence of my remorse to help with my sentencing. As legal proceedings continued, Eliza coordinated with Marcus to preserve what remained of the estate. Tax authorities placed liens on most assets, and legal fees ate up much of what remained. The inheritance that had caused so much conflict dwindled to almost nothing. I ended up pleading guilty to multiple charges of fraud and forgery. At my sentencing hearing, I expressed genuine remorse for my actions. The judge offered a reduced sentence of 7 years with the possibility of parole after 3, considering my confession and cooperation. Evidence mounted regarding Theo's involvement in the fire spreading beyond the initial accident. Just as things looked bad for him, Ruby provided time-stamped photos proving it was indeed accidental. The arson charges were dropped, though negligence charges remained for the improperly stored art supplies. Theo accepted responsibility for negligence with the art supplies and faced his own sentencing. The prosecution pushed for jail time, citing the extensive damage to the family home. Diana testified about Theo's character, describing positive changes she'd observed in him since they'd first met. Her testimony, despite how poorly our family had treated her, moved the judge. Jordan offered to help rebuild the family business using his business minor knowledge, but most assets were frozen pending the tax investigation. The siblings collectively decided to sell the remaining property instead and use the proceeds to pay for Diana's medical treatment. Eliza prepared for Theo's sentencing hearing with character. Witnesses from the art community. A surprise witness appeared, Dad's former secretary with decades of observations about our family dynamics. Her testimony about Dad's manipulative behavior provided context for Theo's actions. Theo received a sentence of 18 months in a minimum security facility. The judge permitted him to create an art therapy program for fellow inmates, giving him purpose during his punishment. Diana's health deteriorated rapidly in the months following the trial. She refused extensive treatment, saying she wanted quality time with her children rather than exhausting medical interventions. Jordan and Ruby struggled with this impending loss while just beginning relationships with their half-siblings. I received occasional updates about Diana's condition from Eliza, who visited her regularly. I was still processing my feelings about everything, sometimes regressing into anger before remembering the devastation my actions had caused. Eliza visited me in prison, bringing news of Diana's worsening condition. I still harbored some resentment and couldn't bring myself to express sympathy. Eliza left family photos on the table but didn't visit again for months, hurt by my continued hostility. Ruby completed medical school with Eliza attending her graduation in my place. The celebration was bittersweet without Diana, who was confined to hospice care by then. They created a video message for her hospital room, showing Ruby in her cap and gown. Jordan discovered Dad had composed music secretly for years. The notation was complex and needed interpretation, so he began collaborating with Theo through prison visits. Their shared artistic interests gradually formed a genuine brotherhood between them. Eliza finalized the sale of family assets, resulting in modest settlements for each sibling after debts and taxes. Diana's medical bills consumed Ruby and Jordan's shares completely. Eliza secretly covered some expenses from her portion, never telling anyone about her generosity. I learned of Diana's deterioration through a letter from Jordan. Prison regulations prevented me from visiting her, which I regretted despite our difficult history. I created a detailed apology painting with guidance from Theo through letters, channeling my regret into art for the first time. Diana passed away peacefully with Jordan, Ruby, and Eliza at her bedside. Neither Theo nor I could attend the funeral due to our incarceration. Jordan recorded the service on video for us to watch later. The siblings discovered Diana had left letters for each of us, including me and Theo. Each letter contained painfully honest assessments of our character, alongside genuine forgiveness. We all had to confront our roles in the family fracture through her final words to us. Eliza visited Theo regularly, bringing news and art supplies. She struggled with being the only free sibling for a while, carrying the burden of rebuilding family connections alone. She eventually started a support group for families affected by white-collar crime, turning our experience into something helpful for others. 3 years after Diana's passing, Eliza stood in the gallery opening of Fractured Light, a collaborative exhibition featuring Theo's paintings inspired by Jordan's music compositions. Theo had been released 18 months earlier and built a reputation for art, addressing family trauma and redemption. Jordan had turned Dad's secret compositions into an award-winning chamber music series that toured nationally. Ruby became a practicing physician specializing in cardiac care, perhaps influenced by both Dad's heart condition and her mother's cancer. She brought her toddler daughter named Grace Diana to family gatherings, a symbol of reconciliation and new beginnings. I was still serving my reduced sentence with 2 years remaining. I had become a model prisoner, teaching business ethics to fellow inmates based on my own failures. My letters to the family showed genuine remorse and self-reflection that had been impossible for me before. The inheritance that once divided us was long gone, but we built something more valuable in its place: truth and tentative trust. The family business was replaced by a small foundation addressing children of parents with double lives, which Eliza managed alongside her legal practice. Though Dad's deception nearly destroyed us all, his final test, forcing us to confront each other as family, eventually succeeded beyond his hopes, though not in the way he planned. As gallery visitors admired artwork depicting fragmented family photographs reassembled into new patterns, Eliza checked her phone and saw a message from me about my upcoming parole hearing. She sent a simple reply: "We'll all be there." Looking back now, it's hard to believe how quickly our supposedly normal family imploded, like a house built on quicksand. The day after we discovered Dad's double life, I found myself sitting in my childhood bedroom, staring at old trophies Dad had proudly displayed. I remember picking up this baseball trophy from when I was 12. Dad had cheered so loudly when I hit that game-winning home run, and I just hurled it against the wall, watching it shatter into pieces, just like my perception of him. Finding out your dead father is basically a criminal mastermind of deception isn't something they prepare you for in therapy or self-help books. Let me tell you, during those early days after the will reading, Eliza tried organizing family dinner at the house, thinking maybe some normalcy would help. She made lasagna, Mom's old recipe that Dad always raved about. When she called us to the table, Theo and I just looked at each other and burst out laughing. This hysterical, unhinged kind of laughter that quickly turned to crying. Poor Eliza stood there holding the casserole dish, completely lost. The lasagna ended up sitting untouched all night. I couldn't stop obsessing over every business trip Dad ever took, recalculating timelines in my head. Was he actually at that industry conference in Phoenix? Or was he celebrating Ruby's birthday? Did he miss my college graduation because of a supplier meeting? Or was he watching Jordan's piano recital? Every memory became suspect, requiring forensic examination. After my arrest, the local paper ran this brutal article: "Morgan Hardware heir arrested, family fortune built on lies." People I'd known my whole life suddenly acted like I had the plague. My high school baseball coach, who'd always treated me like a son, crossed the street to avoid me when I was out on bail. The rumors got so wild, one customer at the hardware store apparently told an employee that Dad had a third family in Mexico. I actually laughed when Eliza told me that one. In jail, my cellmate was this retired accountant who'd embezzled from his church building fund. He'd give me these little pep talks about redemption at night, called me Junior, and told me stories about his own family's disappointment. It was strangely comforting getting advice from someone who'd spectacularly screwed up his life too. Ruby sent me this handmade card during my second month in prison. She'd painted a small abstract piece that looked like broken fragments coming together. No message inside, just her name. I kept it taped to my cell wall until some guard ripped it down during a search. I didn't request another one, but the image stayed with me. When the investigators were combing through Dad's financial records, they found dozens of cash withdrawals made on significant dates in our lives: birthdays, graduations, anniversaries. It was like he was marking these milestones by literally paying for his guilt, $100 at a time. Even the lead investigator said it was the most organized case of family fraud he'd ever seen. During my lowest point in prison, I developed this weird habit of drawing elaborate family trees on napkins during meals. I'd map out all these possible scenarios. What if Mom had known? What if Dad had actually chosen Diana's family over us? What if we were the other family all along? My prison counselor said it was my brain trying to make sense of something fundamentally senseless. A therapist would have charged me $200 an hour for that insight, but I got it for free with my prison slop. Eliza told me later that for weeks after the fire, she'd have these vivid dreams where she'd see Dad sitting at both dining tables simultaneously, like some bizarre quantum physics experiment. In her dreams, he'd look completely content, eating the same meal with two separate families, never noticing the impossibility of it all. The day Theo got released, Jordan picked him up in Dad's old Buick, the one car that hadn't been seized or sold off. Apparently, they drove to the coast and spent hours skipping stones into the ocean, barely talking. Theo told me later it was the first time he felt like he had a brother, not just a rival or an enemy. When I think about it, Dad's elaborate deception required almost admirable logistical skills. Maintaining two separate families for decades, keeping financial records straight, remembering which stories he told to which family. It was like he was running a covert operation rather than just being a typical cheating spouse. If he'd applied that level of meticulousness to the business, maybe we wouldn't have been facing bankruptcy. One bizarre detail that came out during the investigation: Dad had the exact same reading chair in both houses. Same leather, same manufacturer, even positioned at the same angle by the window. The criminal psychologist who reviewed the case said it was a classic compartmentalization technique, creating parallel environments to maintain the mental separation. Something about that detail haunts me more than almost anything else. While I was awaiting trial, Diana sent me a Christmas card signed by her, Jordan, and Ruby. Inside was a photo of Dad at Jordan's high school graduation. He was beaming with pride, his arm around Jordan's shoulders, wearing the watch I'd given him for his birthday that same year. I tore it up immediately, then spent hours taping it back together that night, studying Dad's expression for any hint of guilt or conflict. There weren't any obvious signs, just a man proud of his son. The prosecutors had this timeline chart they'd created for the case, showing Dad's movements between the two families over 27 years. It was color-coded and stretched across an entire wall of the courtroom. Looking at it during my trial, I realized he'd managed to attend every major event in both families' lives, meticulously alternating his absences so neither family felt consistently neglected. It was both impressive and utterly heartbreaking. Eliza found this old voice recorder in Dad's desk drawer months after everything happened. It contained dictated notes about each of us kids, observations, worries, moments of pride. He'd recorded thoughts about all 5 of us, talking about Jordan's musical talent with the same pride he expressed about my business acumen or Theo's artistic gifts. Hearing his voice discussing all his children together was jarring. In his mind, we weren't separate families, just separate locations. The prison chaplain asked me once what I would say to my dad if he were still alive. I couldn't answer for weeks. When I finally could, I realized I wouldn't say anything. I just listened. Because after all this time, the one thing we never really had was truth between us. Dad's old secretary Mary confided in Eliza that she'd suspected something was off for years. Dad would celebrate Secretary's Day with 2 different gifts, telling Mary to keep one at the office and taking the other one home. She'd assumed he had a girlfriend maybe, but never imagined an entire second family. The way she described it, it was like working for 2 different men who happened to share the same body. After learning about Dad's depression medication, Theo discovered a half-finished letter in Dad's desk addressed to his therapist. In it, Dad described feeling like he was watching himself live 2 separate lives, unable to integrate them or choose between them. He wrote that ending either relationship would be like cutting off a limb. Theo burned the letter after reading it, telling me later he couldn't bear the thought of anyone else seeing Dad so vulnerable. During my second year in prison, I received a royalty check for a small amount. Apparently, Theo and Jordan had composed a piece called Divided Legacy that had been featured in a documentary about family secrets. They'd listed me as a co-creator, even though I had nothing to do with it. When I called Theo to question this, he simply said, "Your story is part of it too, whether you like it or not." In the final analysis, what strikes me most isn't that Dad maintained 2 families. It's that neither family suspected anything for decades. We all accepted his absences, his excuses, his compartmentalized affection as normal. What does that say about our expectations of fathers, of men, of family? Maybe the real tragedy isn't just Dad's deception, but how easily we all accommodated it. As I sit here writing this from my prison library computer, yes, they give us limited access for rehabilitation, I realize I'm still trying to make sense of everything. I wonder sometimes if there's a universe where all 5 of us grew up together, where Dad made a different choice, where our moms found some unconventional arrangement that worked for everyone. But then I remember this isn't a quirky Netflix drama. This was our actual lives, shattered by one man's inability to make a choice and stick with it. The irony is, in trying to keep both families happy, he ensured we'd all end up devastated. So yes, I caught my dad living a double life when he died, and in the process, I lost everything. My freedom, my business, my reputation, and most importantly, the father I thought I knew. But somehow, improbably, I gained something too. 3 siblings I never knew I had, and eventually, a chance at authentic relationships built on truth rather than convenience. Dad's deception tore us apart, but facing that deception together is slowly, painfully, bringing us back together in ways none of us could have imagined.